The scorching sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty streets of Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. The heat was almost tangible, a heavy blanket that seemed to press down on the city's weary shoulders. In the distance, the faint hum of traffic blended with the calls of street vendors and the chatter of children playing in narrow alleys. It was a city that carried its history visibly, in cracked walls, in faded paint, in faces lined with stories of hardship and resilience. But amid this quiet chaos, one man sat quietly in his modest office, poised to change the fate of his nation forever. Ibrahim Traoré leaned forward in his chair, his eyes fixed on the worn map spread across his desk. The map was dotted with the rich veins of gold and minerals buried beneath the earth, treasures that had long been the source of both hope and heartbreak for Burkina Faso. For decades, foreign powers and multinational corporations had siphoned off these riches, lining their pockets while the people suffered. Corruption had woven itself like an invisible net through every layer of the system, ensnaring politicians, officials, and even communities desperate to survive. But Traoré was not a man to accept this quiet suffering. His journey from a soldier to the youngest president had been forged in fire, through hardship, loss, and a relentless determination to reclaim his country's dignity. Behind his calm exterior burned a fierce resolve that refused to be extinguished by injustice. Outside his window, the city's pulse continued, a symphony of everyday life that seemed unchanged by the power struggles taking place behind closed doors. Yet beneath that surface, a storm was gathering. The Western CEOs who controlled the gold mines were plotting their next move, blind to the fact that they were about to face an adversary unlike any they had encountered before. The message came late one humid evening. An encrypted note flickered onto his secure phone. Deal imminent. Western consortium moves to seize full control of the mines. The words hit him like a thunderclap. This was the moment they had all feared. A coalition of powerful corporate executives backed by foreign governments and financiers was maneuvering to finalize a deal that would tighten their grip on Burkina Faso's most precious assets. The stakes were higher than ever. If the deal went through, it would be a death sentence to any hope of sovereignty. For a moment, Traoré allowed himself to feel the weight of it, the despair, the anger, the memory of those who had suffered, under the shadow of greed. He thought of the miners, the fathers and mothers whose hands bore the scars of toil, the children whose futures were sold before they were born, the streets where promises were made and broken. But that moment passed quickly. There was no room for hesitation. Traoré summoned his closest advisors, men and women who had stood by him through thick and thin. They gathered in a small conference room, its walls bare save for a single photograph of Burkina Faso's flag, fluttering defiantly against a stormy sky. The air was thick with tension as they laid out the plan the CEOs had set in motion. The foreign companies sought not only to control the extraction of gold, but also to manipulate local governments, silence opposition, and cement a system of exploitation that would last generations. The room was heavy with disbelief. "They think we are powerless," one advisor said, voice tight with frustration. "But they don't know Ibrahim. They don't know our people." Traoré listened quietly, his gaze steady. "We cannot fight their money," he said softly. "But we can fight their secrets." His words echoed in the room like a call to arms. The battle would not be fought with guns or armies, but with truth and strategy. It was a game of shadows, of leverage and cunning, and Traoré was ready. Days turned into nights as he pored over documents, communications, and intelligence reports. The story that unfolded was more sinister than anyone had imagined. The Western CEOs had built an intricate web of shell companies, offshore accounts, and corrupt middlemen to siphon billions of dollars from the country's wealth. Their greed was matched only by their arrogance. They believed their network was impenetrable. But they had underestimated the power of a man who understood both the system and his people. One evening, as twilight draped the city in muted blues and purples, a discreet visitor arrived at the presidential palace. She was a foreign diplomat with a reputation for navigating treacherous political waters. A woman who had once been an insider in the halls of global power, but had since turned her allegiance toward justice. She handed Traoré a thick dossier, its cover plain and unassuming. "This," she whispered, "is the key." Inside were detailed records of illicit transactions, secret meetings, and bribes paid to officials both inside and outside Burkina Faso. The files revealed not just financial corruption, but a deeper plan to dominate the people themselves, through control of resources, media, and political influence. As Traoré flipped through the pages, images formed in his mind, the faces of his countrymen trapped in cycles of poverty, their voices muffled by fear. He clenched his fists, feeling the weight of responsibility press down on him. He knew what he had to do. With steely resolve, he began to build a plan unlike any before. The first step was to gather undeniable evidence and bring it to light. He reached out to trusted journalists, human rights groups, and international legal experts. Quietly, strategically, the truth began to leak beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Meanwhile, Traoré prepared for the inevitable confrontation. The CEOs expected to meet a compliant leader, willing to sign away his country's wealth in exchange for empty promises. Instead, they found a man who held their secrets like a weapon. The day of reckoning arrived in a sterile, glass-walled boardroom in a high-rise building far from the dusty streets of Ouagadougou. The CEOs arrived, their faces polished, their suits tailored, their confidence unshaken. They believed themselves untouchable. Traoré entered alone, his presence calm but commanding. As he took his seat, he placed the dossier on the table between them, its contents a silent thunderclap. "For years," he said slowly, "you have taken from Burkina Faso without respect or remorse. You have used our people as tools, our land as a resource to be depleted. But no longer." The room grew tense as he laid out the evidence, financial trails that could no longer be denied, witness accounts, and documents linking the CEOs directly to bribery and exploitation. Cameras streamed, lived to an audience worldwide, and international authorities were already preparing to act. The CEOs shifted uncomfortably. One tried to interrupt, dismissing the claims as hearsay, but Traoré's eyes locked on his own, unyielding. "You are not negotiating today," he said. "You are facing justice." What followed was a storm unlike any Burkina Faso had ever seen. Global. Investigations were launched, assets frozen, and billions of dollars ordered to be returned. The financial empires built on greed and corruption began to crumble. Back home, the people watched with awe and hope. The gold mines, once symbols of exploitation, were returned to national control. New policies were enacted to ensure transparency and community involvement. Slowly, the country began to breathe again. But for Traoré, this victory was not simply about money or power. It was about reclaiming the soul of his nation. He walked the streets of Ouagadougou in the quiet hours, feeling the pulse of his people, hopeful, resilient, and free. In a small square near the market, children played beneath a sky washed clean by rain. Women carried baskets of fruit, their laughter mingling with the calls of merchants. For the first time in decades, the city felt alive with possibility. Standing amidst this scene, Traoré felt a quiet satisfaction. He had not just outsmarted the CEOs, he had restored faith. He had reminded the world that even the smallest nations with the strongest hearts could rise. And as the sun rose the next morning, casting golden light over the land, Ibrahim Traoré knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter. One written by the people, for the people, and guarded fiercely against those who would seek to steal it again. If this story touched your heart, consider subscribing for more inspiring tales of hope, healing, and unexpected kindness. Hit the like button and share this with someone who needs it today.